I met my wife, Rachel, at a summer barbecue 10 years ago. I was 28, she was 26. It wasn't some Hollywood movie moment. No sparks flying through the air, no slow motion. Just me, awkwardly holding a paper plate piled too high with ribs, and her standing by the cooler struggling to open a soda. I offered her mine. She rolled her eyes and said, "That's not how this works," but smiled while she took it anyway. That was our first interaction, and for some reason it stuck with me. Rachel was my friend Joel's cousin, visiting from out of state. She was loud in the best way, quick with a comeback, always laughing like the joke was 5 times funnier than it actually was. We talked the rest of the afternoon about books, music, movies we both hated. I found out she was a freelance graphic designer who did book covers and illustrations for indie authors. I was working in IT at the time, mostly dull help desk stuff, but she made it sound like I had the most fascinating job in the world. We went out the next day. 1 coffee turned into 3. We walked through the farmer's market just to keep talking. It was one of those rare connections that felt easy, like you'd skipped over the getting-to-know-you phase and landed straight into something real. She ended up staying in the city. We moved in together after a year, got married 2 years after that in a small ceremony with close family and friends. Nothing flashy, just honest. Now we live in a quiet suburb on the edge of town, a place with maple-lined streets, friendly neighbors, and the occasional block party where someone always brings a casserole no one touches. Our house isn't huge, but it's home. 3 bedrooms, cozy den, backyard big enough for our golden retriever Jasper to wear himself out chasing squirrels. I turned the basement into a little home office/game room hybrid, while Rachel turned the sunroom into her studio. She paints in the mornings with the windows open, music playing low, usually something mellow with a female vocalist I've never heard of. We have a rhythm, the kind you don't really think about until you step back and look. We cook together most nights, she does the chopping. I'm on seasoning duty. Sundays are for pancakes and laziness. We do date nights once or twice a month, though it's usually just dinner and a movie at home in pajamas. And even after all these years, we still tell each other the little things. What annoyed us that day? What made us laugh? What we're craving for dinner even if it's too much trouble to make. It's hard to describe without sounding like I'm sugarcoating it. But at that point in our lives, we were just solid. You know? Like a pair of boots you've broken in over time. Comfortable. Reliable. Built to last. That's where we were. That's where I was. And that's what makes the rest of this story so hard to tell. If I had to describe our life in a single word, I think I'd go with settled. Not in a bad way. Not the way people say they've settled for something less than they wanted. I mean it in the way you describe soil that's had time to rest. Steady. Rooted. Rachel and I had built something over the years that felt lived in, worn with love. There were scuffs, sure, but they came from use, from time, from routine, from being 2 very human people doing life side by side. We'd grown into each other's habits. I left coffee mugs everywhere. She started collecting them and putting them in weird places just to mess with me. She talked during movies. I learned to pause the screen until she finished her thoughts. I never remembered where I put my keys. She bought a small bowl for the front table and called it the key graveyard. Somehow, it worked. She had her studio work, and I had my job in IT project management, which is as thrilling as it sounds. We both worked from home more often than not, and for a lot of couples I know, that would have been a nightmare. 2 people bumping into each other every day with nowhere to escape. But for us, it was just normal. We'd take lunch breaks together sometimes. Other times we just did our own thing and barely saw each other until dinner. There was a balance there that I really appreciated. Weekends were our us time. Saturday mornings, she liked to go to the local farmer's market, and I mean she loved that place. She'd come back with way too many herbs, an overpriced candle, and a story about someone she met at the pickle stand. Sunday evenings were slower, wine, a movie, or board game, or just the 2 of us on the porch with Jasper lying at our feet. Sometimes we wouldn't even talk much. We didn't need to. And then there were the holidays. Rachel took them seriously. She had a Pinterest board for every season. I'm talking label bins in the garage, color-coded table runners, themed desserts. Halloween was tasteful spooky. Thanksgiving was full-on Martha Stewart. And Christmas? I swear she started planning in October. Every year she'd hand-make a new ornament for the tree. And every year I'd pretend I didn't know that was what she was doing when she'd disappear into her studio with glitter stuck to her sleeve. Our families were a part of our lives too, though in slightly different ways. Her parents lived out of state, so we only saw them a couple times a year, usually around the holidays. My folks lived about 40 minutes away, and we visited pretty often. My younger brother, Eric, lived even closer, same city, about a 20-minute drive. He was the laid-back type, never married, always jumping between jobs that let him travel or work freelance. Rachel and Eric got along well. Honestly, she got along with everyone. She had that thing, that ease with people, that way of making you feel like she'd known you forever. We weren't flashy. We didn't post long Instagram captions about my person or go on big extravagant trips every year. But I'd catch her looking at me from across the kitchen or hear her singing along to her playlist while painting, and I'd think, yeah, this is the life I wanted. Not perfect, not dramatic, just full. That's what I thought we had. That's what I knew we had. At least, back then. If there's one thing I've learned about relationships, it's that the little things matter more than we give them credit for. Anyone can show up for the big moments, anniversaries, birthdays, holidays, but it's the small stuff that keeps you connected. And for a long time, Rachel and I were really good at that. She'd leave sticky notes on my monitor when she knew I had a long day ahead. Don't forget you're the smartest guy in every Zoom call. That kind of thing. I'd preheat her coffee mug before she came downstairs, just the way she liked it. We kept a shared notes app on our phones where we'd drop ideas for date nights or recipes we wanted to try. Most of the notes were jokes or memes by the end, but it still made me smile when I saw them. Our dynamic wasn't intense or dramatic. It was soft, in that way that only comes with time. The kind of love that feels like pulling on your favorite hoodie. Familiar, reliable, a little frayed at the edges, maybe, but warm all the same. Even our arguments were routine. We weren't yellers. If something bugged us, it would usually come out while folding laundry or making dinner. Next time you order groceries, don't get the giant jar of pickles. It barely fits in the fridge. Well, if you didn't hoard 5 kinds of hot sauce, maybe we'd have room. A little back and forth, a laugh, maybe a sarcastic, I'll try to be better, and that was it. I never went to bed wondering where we stood. Rachel's work kept her creative and, in some ways, in her own world. Her studio was her sanctuary, a mix of chaos and color, paint splattered on the floor, her desk stacked with sketch pads and tablets. She could get completely absorbed for hours, barely noticing the time until Jasper came pawing at her leg because it was past dinner. She'd light incense in there, always some calming scent with a name like Forest Dusk or Lavender River, and it would drift through the hallway into the rest of the house. We had plans, too. Nothing wild, but things we looked forward to. Fixing up the guest room, maybe turning it into a mini library. Taking a trip up north in the fall to see the leaves change. One day, we talked about maybe getting a little cabin somewhere we could sneak off to on weekends. Somewhere quiet. Rachel wanted chickens, I wanted a porch with a view. We'd laugh and call it future talk, but I believed in it. I believed in us. Even with my brother Eric, things felt easy. He'd come by for game nights every few weeks, usually bringing some weird bottle of craft whiskey or a frozen pizza he claimed was life-changing. Rachel and he had the same dry humor, and I liked watching them banter. It made family gatherings easier, too. Holidays, birthdays, even just Sunday dinners at my parents' place. Everyone got along. No tension, no awkwardness. I never thought twice about any of it. Looking back, I think I held on to this idea that we were one of the lucky couples. The ones who'd made it past the honeymoon phase, past the 7-year slump, and into the stage where things just worked. That quiet companionship, that unspoken trust. It's hard to admit how much I took that for granted. But at the time, I thought we had forever. I don't remember the exact moment things started to feel different. That's the thing about change. It doesn't always come crashing in like a storm. Sometimes it creeps in through the cracks, silent and slow, until one day you look around and realize you don't recognize the place you're standing in. At first, it was just little things. Rachel's phone, for instance. She used to leave it lying around the house like it was nothing. Kitchen counter, bathroom sink, on the arm of the couch. But lately, she started keeping it on her at all times. Even when she'd get up just to refill her water, she'd take it with her screen face down, notifications silenced. I didn't think much of it at first. Everyone's got a right to privacy. But it was just different. She also got into the habit of going out more. Errands, mostly. Groceries, last-minute art supplies, coffee runs that used to be our thing, she started doing them alone. I'd offer to tag along, and she'd say things like, "Nah, it's quicker if I just run in," or I need a little solo time. Fair enough. We all need space. But I started noticing how often those errands ran longer than they used to. A 10-minute trip would turn into an hour and a half. She always had an excuse ready. Traffic. Long line. Ran into someone she knew. I didn't push it. Then there were the texts. I'd catch her smiling at her screen, fingers moving fast. Once, I walked into the room and she quickly turned the screen off. I joked, "What's so top secret?" And she just smirked and said, "Pinterest addiction." It's embarrassing. That would have been enough if it hadn't been the 5th time that week. I tried brushing it off. Maybe she was just stressed. Maybe she was working on a surprise. Maybe I was just overthinking it. But I've always trusted my gut, and lately, it had started whispering things I didn't want to hear. The thing that really made me pause, and I mean really pause, happened on a Saturday afternoon. Rachel had gone out to pick up some canvases from an art store across town. She said she'd be back in an hour. After about 2, I sent her a casual, "Everything okay?" text. No reply. Half an hour later, she finally responded, "Sorry, babe, ran into your mom at the grocery store." We talked for a while. On my way now. I didn't think anything of it until the next day, when I mentioned it to my mom in passing, just something like, "Heard you ran into Rachel yesterday." She looked at me blankly. "What?" "No, I haven't seen her in a couple weeks." It hit me in the chest, that small lie. It wasn't big or dramatic, just a crack. But once a crack shows up, it's hard not to stare at it. That night, I laid in bed next to her and watched her scroll on her phone, laughing softly to herself, not even noticing I was watching her. I wanted to ask what was so funny. I wanted to reach out and pull her close, like I used to. But I didn't. Instead, I turned toward the wall and stared into the dark. Something was off. I didn't know what yet, but I was starting to feel it. The mind does strange things when it starts doubting the things it once took for granted. It looks for meaning in the mundane, patterns and randomness. You start questioning if something actually changed or if you did. That's where I was. Somewhere between denial and instinct, between trusting the woman I married and questioning everything I thought I knew. Rachel had always been open with me, or at least I thought she was. She used to tell me everything, random thoughts, weird dreams, who she ran into at the store, which client was being difficult that day. That steady stream of little details was how we stayed close. It was the kind of connection that doesn't announce itself until it starts drying up. Lately, her stories were getting shorter. Vague. I'd ask how her day was, and she'd shrug and say, "Just work stuff," or "Nothing exciting." She used to come into my office in the middle of the day just to steal a snack or kiss me on the forehead. Now, I'd hear her moving around the house like a ghost, present, but somehow absent. One afternoon, I came back from walking Jasper and noticed her car keys were gone. It was almost dinner. No note, no text. She showed up about an hour later, smiling like nothing was unusual, holding a bag from a boutique I'd never seen before. I asked her where she went, and she said, "Just felt like doing a little retail therapy." I glanced inside the bag. Lingerie. Bold. Red. Nothing like her usual taste. I raised an eyebrow and joked, "This for me, or your alter ego?" She laughed but didn't answer. I should have let it go. But later that night, while she was in the shower, I checked the receipt in the bag. The timestamp showed 2:47 p.m. She didn't leave until almost 5. That kept me up. I wasn't proud of myself, but the next day, I started paying more attention. Not confronting her, just noticing. Her gym bag was by the door one morning, so I casually asked if she was going. She nodded, said she'd be back in an hour. I waited a while, then drove by the gym on my way to grab coffee. Her car wasn't there. Maybe she parked somewhere else, I told myself. Maybe she changed her mind. Maybe I'm just being paranoid. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But my brother Eric called that same afternoon, asked if I wanted to catch the game at his place that weekend. Something about his voice struck me. I don't know how to explain it. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. He just sounded off. Overly casual, like he was walking on a tightrope he didn't know I could see. We hung up, and I stared at the phone for a long time. Eric and Rachel had always been friendly. Nothing out of the ordinary. But lately, I couldn't remember the last time we'd all been in the same room. The last few family dinners, Rachel had some excuse not to come. Work deadlines, migraines, needing quiet time. Eric never asked where she was. At some point, I'd stopped bringing her up around him. And I couldn't help but wonder if he was doing the same. I kept telling myself I needed more to go on. Something real. Something undeniable. But in my gut, I knew the temperature had changed. The problem was, I didn't know who I was starting to doubt more. Her or myself. There's a quiet kind of panic that builds when you feel like you're the only one not in on the joke. Like walking into a room where everyone just stopped talking, and you're left wondering what was said before you arrived. That's what life had started to feel like, a performance I was unknowingly acting in, while someone else held the script. Rachel was more attentive now. Not in the way I remembered. It wasn't thoughtful or intimate. It felt calculated, like someone trying to cover their tracks. She'd randomly ask about my day, kiss me on the cheek while I was making coffee, leave cute little texts she hadn't sent in months. On the surface, it was exactly the kind of thing I'd been missing. But underneath, it felt rehearsed, offbeat, like she was trying to imitate her old self, and not quite pulling it off. And then there was her phone, again. I couldn't unsee it. The constant notifications she pretended not to notice. The way she'd tilt the screen away if I happened to be nearby. One night, she went to brush her teeth and left it on the couch beside me. It buzzed. I didn't even mean to look. My eyes just went there. It was a message preview. No name. Just the words, "You still thinking about last night?" I didn't open it. I didn't need to. She came back from the bathroom a few minutes later, picked up the phone like it was on fire, and pressed the lock screen before sliding it into her hoodie pocket. Didn't say a word. I spent that night staring at the ceiling again. I started noticing new clothes in the laundry. Pieces I'd never seen her wear. A silky blouse, a fitted sweater that still had the tags. Expensive perfume lingering in the hallway. She hadn't worn perfume in months. When I asked about the new stuff, she waved it off, said she just wanted to feel good about herself again. Self-care, she called it. I nodded, but I could feel the lump forming in my throat. It wasn't just her. Eric had been weird lately too. We met for lunch the following week, just the two of us. It felt forced. He barely touched his food. Normally he was the one making jokes, teasing me about how predictable I was. But this time he was quiet. Fidgety. Like he wanted to say something, but kept stopping himself. At one point, I brought up an old memory. Us camping as kids, getting lost in the woods for 2 hours until Dad found us. I was just trying to lighten the mood. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. And then he said something that hit me sideways. Sometimes I wish we could go back to when things were simple. He wasn't talking about camping. I could tell. Later that night, I found Rachel sitting in the living room with her laptop, headphones in. She didn't see me standing in the doorway at first. She was smiling at the screen, not the kind of smile you give a video or a meme. It was that private smile. The one you give someone who just said something meant only for you. She closed the laptop as soon as she saw me. I didn't say anything. Neither did she. We went to bed in silence, her facing the window, me staring at the back of her head, counting the breaths between us. I wanted to be wrong. God, I wanted to be wrong. But something was coming. I could feel it. I don't know what made me agree to go to that dinner. Maybe it was routine. Maybe it was the sick need to pretend nothing was broken, to cling to whatever scraps of normal I had left. My mother had invited us all, me, Rachel, and Eric, over for a family meal. She does that every few months, tries to bring everyone under the same roof like it's still the early 2000s, and we're kids arguing over board games. I almost said no. Part of me had already started to pull away from it all, quietly, without admitting it to myself. But I showed up anyway. Because when everything's on fire, it's easier to pretend the smoke is just part of the scenery. Rachel was already there when I arrived. So was Eric. My mom's house was warm and smelled like baked chicken and rosemary. Too comforting, too normal. I remember thinking that. Like the smell itself was lying to me. Everyone was smiling, pouring wine, laughing over something I'd missed. Rachel looked beautiful. She wore a dress I hadn't seen before. Deep green, elegant, just understated enough to seem effortless. She kissed my cheek like everything was fine. Like we weren't quietly drifting into a void I couldn't describe. The evening unfolded like any other. My mom told the same stories she always tells. Eric laughed at all the right moments. Rachel joined in, warm and charming, touching my arm just often enough to make me question if I'd imagined everything that had led up to that night. For a moment, just a moment, I let myself fall back into it. Into the idea of us. Of this family. Of safety. It didn't last. After dinner, my mom stepped into the kitchen to get dessert. I went to use the restroom, the guest bathroom at the back of the house, near her small home office. I remember walking past that door, half closed, hearing voices behind it. Rachel's voice. Eric's voice. And then, my mother's. I didn't mean to stop. I don't even think I fully understood what I was doing. But something in Rachel's tone made my legs freeze. It was lower, more intimate than I'd heard it all night. There was a softness to it, the kind of voice you use when you're confessing something tender, something real. The kind of voice she used to use with me. I heard her say, "I wish we didn't have to keep pretending." Eric replied, "It won't be forever. We just have to keep it quiet a little longer." And then my mother's voice. Calm, even reassuring. "What matters is that you're happy. I've seen how you light up when you're together. That's not something you fake." There was a pause. Then Rachel said, almost whispering, "I just hate lying to him. He's been good to me." My heart stopped. I mean that literally. For a second, I felt like I wasn't in my body anymore. I was floating somewhere above, listening to my life unravel from a distance. I should have stormed in. I should have screamed. But I didn't. I stood there like a statue, every hair on my arms standing up, blood rushing in my ears. I felt like I might pass out. My mother, the woman who raised me, the woman who held my hand when I cried over scraped knees and teenage heartbreaks, was in that room, sitting calmly with my wife and my brother, talking about their relationship, talking about how they made each other light up, as if I wasn't even a person in the equation anymore, as if I was already out of the picture. I didn't wait to hear more. I turned and walked out the front door. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't look back. I got in my car and drove, white-knuckling the steering wheel, not even sure where I was going. My phone buzzed a few minutes later, Rachel, asking where I'd gone. I didn't answer. There wasn't anything left to say. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room, the light from the street lamp slicing through the blinds like it was trying to pry into my thoughts. My chest was tight, my jaw locked. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. Not yet. Instead, I stared at the door, waiting, daring it to open. Rachel came home close to midnight. She must have figured I'd gone out to cool off, or maybe she knew exactly what had happened. Maybe she heard me walking away from that door and just didn't care. Either way, she walked in like nothing had shifted, keys jingling, heels clicking lightly against the floor, her coat draped over her arm like she was coming back from any other night. I didn't say a word, just watched her walk into our house like it still belonged to her. She froze when she saw me. "Hey," she said, cautious, like I was a wounded animal she didn't want to startle. "You left kind of suddenly. Is everything okay?" I didn't answer. I just stood up and walked past her, silent, deliberate, and went to the bedroom. I grabbed her suitcase from the closet, threw it on the bed, and started packing everything that belonged to her. Every drawer she called hers, every item that still carried her scent, I emptied it out with steady, bitter precision. She stood there in the doorway, stunned, asking me what I was doing. "You can go be with him now," I said, my voice low, hollow. "You don't have to lie anymore. Not to me. Not here." She stepped forward, panicked. "Wait. Hold on. Just tell me what you think you heard. Let me explain. You're twisting this." I stopped folding her clothes. I looked her dead in the eyes. "I was there, Rachel. I heard everything. You, him, my mother, all of it." And just like that, her whole demeanor shifted. The guilt didn't look like shock anymore. It looked like annoyance, like inconvenience. She started pacing, running her hands through her hair. "It's not what you think," she said, like that phrase had any meaning left. "I didn't plan for this to happen. It just did. I was lonely. You've been so checked out lately. I didn't know if you even saw me anymore." I laughed. A dry, humorless sound that didn't even feel like it came from me. "I saw you," I said. "I saw you every day. I trusted you every day. You were the one looking the other way." She tried to approach me. I held up my hand. "Don't. Just don't." Then I turned and walked to the window. I opened it wide, leaned over, and started tossing her things out. Dress by dress. Shoe by shoe. Her jewelry box. Her tote bag. Everything that wasn't earned in this house by both of us, it went flying. "Stop," she shouted, rushing over to grab at the suitcase. "Are you serious right now? You're acting crazy." I didn't even blink. "Crazy was trusting you." She tried to push the window shut, but I stepped in between. "This is what happens when you betray someone who gave you everything," I said quietly. "This is the cost of the fantasy you and my brother built." Then I grabbed her phone off the nightstand and tossed it on the floor, not hard enough to break it, but hard enough to make a point. She stared at me, tears forming now, but I felt nothing for them. I walked to the front door, opened it, and motioned toward the pile of her belongings scattered across the lawn. Go. She shook her head. Please. Let's talk. Don't do this. We can fix it. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, and I didn't let her back in. She stayed outside for over an hour. I didn't move. I sat on the couch, watching the front door, hearing the muffled sound of her crying, of her trying to call someone. Eventually, headlights swept across the living room wall. A car pulled up. She got in, and then she was gone. But I wasn't done. I texted my sister, my only sibling other than Eric. We hadn't been especially close in the last few years, not for any bad reason, just life. But she always had my back. She always hated liars. I told her everything. And then I crossed one more line I didn't think I ever would. I invited her over that weekend. We had dinner. We drank wine. We sat close. And when she asked me what this was, what I was trying to do, I told her the truth. I'm not trying to fall in love. I just want my wife to know what it feels like. She stared at me, stunned, but she didn't leave. And the next morning, I sent Rachel a message. You weren't the only one who had a secret. Now we're even. Don't come back. That was the last time we spoke. After Rachel was gone, the silence in the house felt different. It wasn't peaceful, it was heavy, like the kind that comes after an explosion. Every room held the ghost of something that used to mean something. The air had weight. Still, I didn't let myself sit in the grief. Not yet. I wasn't finished. What Rachel and Eric did, that betrayal, it wasn't just a moment of weakness or a fling that spiraled too far. It was deliberate, ongoing, covered in layers of lies. And worse than that, they had done it under my nose, right in the middle of my life, with the passive approval of the one person who should have been on my side. My mother's silence, no, her support, had turned the whole thing from a personal betrayal into something deeper, something unfixable. I didn't reach out to her after that night. She sent me messages, left voicemails. I didn't respond. I had nothing left to say to her. Maybe one day I'll grieve that loss too, but right now, it just felt like she made a choice, and I was finally making mine. Eric had a job working for a mid-sized media firm downtown. Flexible hours, easy benefits, exactly the kind of job that let him bounce around and still keep up the image of a working professional. I'd never taken much interest in his work life before, but now I did. It didn't take much digging to remember that one of the firm's senior partners, a guy named Mason, used to play golf with my boss. I'd met him once or twice at charity events, enough that reaching out didn't feel out of the blue. I scheduled a meeting under the pretense of a possible consulting partnership. When we met, I kept things casual at first, small talk, industry chatter, and then I brought up Eric. I didn't embellish or dramatize. I simply laid out a pattern: missed meetings, unexplained absences, declining output, inconsistent collaboration with his team. I had just enough truth to make it believable, enough suggestion to spark concern. Mason nodded thoughtfully. He didn't ask many questions. A week later, I heard through mutual connections that Eric had been let go due to performance concerns. Apparently, it wasn't the first time red flags had been raised, but my conversation tipped the scale. I felt no guilt, not even a flicker. In my mind, I hadn't done anything cruel. I just peeled back the mask he wore and let the consequences find him. I didn't reach out to him. I didn't yell. I didn't send a text to gloat or explain. I let the silence speak for itself. I wanted him to sit with it, the same way I had sat with the weight of his betrayal. I wanted him to feel the hollow echo of something gone, the way trust, once broken, leaves a void no apology can fill. The last piece of this unraveling was cutting off my mother completely. I unfollowed, unfriended, deleted her number. I blocked her on everything. I knew how that would look from the outside, like I was the cold one, the ungrateful son. But I didn't care. Her choice to sit at that table and nod along as my wife and brother confessed what they were doing wasn't neutral. It was complicity, and I wasn't going to keep a seat at my table for someone who watched my life burn and said nothing. There was no grand confrontation, no screaming match, just distance, just finality. Some betrayals don't come with closure. They come with silence. And sometimes, that's the only justice that matters. There was an odd stillness after it all ended. Not the kind that feels peaceful, more like the quiet after a storm, when everything's wet and wrecked and waiting to be cleaned. I wasn't angry anymore, not in that bone-deep way I had been. I was something else. Hollow maybe. Not broken, just cleared out. Like someone had reached inside me and scraped out everything that used to fill me up. I spent the first few weeks just existing. Waking up, making coffee, working, walking Jasper, sleeping. The house felt different. It echoed. I moved Rachel's leftover things into the garage and eventually gave most of them away. I couldn't look at that red sweater she used to wear on rainy days or the cookbook she never opened but swore she would someday. All of it reminded me of promises that didn't mean anything anymore. I stopped visiting my mother. Stopped replying to people who used to orbit our life. I didn't tell many people what had happened. I didn't want sympathy or shocked gasps or that drawn-out, "I'm so sorry," that people always use when they don't know what else to say. I just wanted space. Time. Nothing. It wasn't until I visited a bookstore one afternoon, just because I didn't want to be home, that I met her. The new woman. Her name was Olivia. She was browsing the fiction table and picked up the same book I was reaching for. We both laughed, made a dumb joke about fate, and then kept talking. There was no spark, not immediately. No dramatic pulse of attraction. It was quiet. Easy. That's what I needed. We started slow. Coffee once a week. A walk through the dog park. Texts that didn't come with double meanings or missing hours. She was grounded in a way Rachel never was. Not flashy, not overly emotional. Just present. She listened when I talked. She didn't try to fix me. She didn't ask for pieces I wasn't ready to give. She just sat with me in the quiet. Over time, something softened. The edges of everything that had happened dulled. I stopped thinking about Rachel when I closed the cabinets she once organized. I stopped replaying the sound of Eric's voice in my head. I still remembered, of course. I always will. But the remembering didn't hurt as much. I told Olivia the truth eventually. Not all of it at once, but enough. She didn't flinch. She didn't ask why I hadn't seen it sooner. She just nodded, held my hand, and said it made sense now, why I kept so much at a distance. And then she let me be exactly where I was, without trying to rush me forward. The first time I laughed again, really laughed, it was with her. Something stupid. A dog in a raincoat slipping on a puddle. It hit me out of nowhere. This was what it felt like to breathe without weight again. To exist without bracing for the next blow. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some fireworks moment where everything fell back into place. It was just life, beginning again. Slowly. Quietly. And this time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. It's strange how a life can unravel so completely and still, somehow, keep going. You think that kind of betrayal will break you forever, and in some ways, it does. But not in the way you expect. It doesn't end you. It just changes you. Quietly. Permanently. Like erosion. It smooths out parts of you that once had edges and roughens others that used to be soft. Months have passed now. More than I realized, to be honest. The seasons changed without asking. The mornings come a little easier. I stopped waking up with a clenched jaw. I don't check my phone expecting anything. The house still creaks in the same places, but it feels more like mine now. Not a shared space haunted by echoes. Rachel hasn't reached out again, not since the message I sent her. I don't know where she is, or if she and Eric tried to turn their fantasy into something real. I don't care. That part of my life feels like a book I already returned to the library. The kind where you remember how it ended, but not the details of each chapter. The kind you don't reread. As for Eric, we haven't spoken. I don't expect we ever will. There's a finality in some betrayals that doesn't leave room for reconciliation. You can only rebuild something if there's still ground to build on. What he did, it burned the foundation. Nothing left but ash. And honestly, I'm okay with that. I've stopped trying to imagine the apology that never came. My mother sent me a letter a few weeks ago. Handwritten. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I opened it. She talked about mistakes, about love and blind spots, and how sometimes we protect the wrong people for the wrong reasons. She said she missed me. She said she understood if I couldn't forgive her. I haven't responded. I'm not angry anymore. That's the strange part. Anger eventually burns itself out. But I haven't found forgiveness either. What I found is something in between. A kind of stillness. Not peace, exactly, but distance. And for now, that's enough. Olivia and I are still seeing each other. Still slow, still steady. We don't talk about the future much. There's something freeing about that, about not rushing toward anything, just letting things unfold as they will. I don't know what we'll become, and for the first time in a long time, that doesn't scare me. I've stopped needing certainty. I just need honesty. And she's given me that from the beginning. I've learned things about myself I wish I didn't have to learn the hard way. I've learned that loyalty can be a trap when it's one-sided. That love isn't a shield against betrayal. That trust, once shattered, can't be put back together in the same shape. And maybe that's okay. Maybe we're not meant to carry everything with us forever. Some things are meant to be let go. I don't tell many people this story. Not in full. It's not something I wear like a badge. But writing it here, putting it down like this, feels like closing the last page of a very long, painful chapter. Not erasing it. Just acknowledging it happened and setting it down. If you've read this far, thank you. Really. It's a strange thing, sharing your lowest moments with strangers. But somehow, it's also the most freeing. I was betrayed by the two people I trusted most. I lost a marriage, a brother, a mother. But I found myself again. And that, finally, feels like enough.